These lessons from Native Americans could save your life. What would happen if you found yourself alone in the wilderness without a smartphone, GPS, or a supermarket around the corner? Modern people, surrounded by technology, often forget the basic skills that for thousands of years allowed our ancestors not only to survive, but to thrive in the harshest conditions. The indigenous peoples of North America were masters of this art. Their knowledge was not just a set of instructions, but a whole philosophy of living in harmony with the world. Their wisdom was not carved in stone, but woven into everyday life, into every gesture and every decision. They did not conquer nature, but became part of it, listening to its language and understanding its laws. This knowledge is more relevant today than ever, because it teaches us the most important things: resourcefulness, observation, and deep respect for the world around us. These lessons are not just exotic stories about the past, but timeless wisdom that can change our perception of reality. They remind us that the most powerful tools for survival are not in our backpacks, but in our minds and hearts. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the ability to stack a few sticks correctly could save an entire tribe from a hungry winter. What if I told you that the most perfect house is one that can be assembled in an hour and carried away with you? For the nomadic tribes of the Great Plains, such a house was the tepee. It was not just a shelter, but an ingenious engineering structure refined over centuries. At its core was a frame of long, straight poles, usually made of pine, which were light and strong. 3 or 4 of the strongest poles were tied together and placed like a tripod. The remaining poles were attached to them, forming a perfect cone. This conical shape was not chosen by chance. It was incredibly resistant to the strong winds that constantly swept across the endless plains. The winds simply flowed around the tepee without damaging it, while any structure with flat walls would have been destroyed. The covering was made of sewn-together processed bison hides. One large tepee could take up to 20 hides. This covering not only protected from rain and snow, but also breathed, ensuring a comfortable microclimate inside. The most important part of the structure were 2 smoke vents at the top, similar to wings. With the help of special poles, they could be turned depending on the direction of the wind. This created a constant draft that drew smoke from the hearth outside, even in the heaviest rain. Inside, an additional inner canopy made of skins, called an osan, was often stretched around the perimeter. It created an air layer that worked like a thermos, keeping it warm in winter and cool in summer. It also protected against condensation dripping down the main covering. The entire structure was completely mobile. The women of the tribe could dismantle the tepee, pack up the poles and covering onto a travois in just an hour. This allowed the entire camp to move quickly behind the bison herds. The entrance to the tepee was always on the east side, facing the rising sun. The interior was clearly organized, men's and women's quarters, and a place of honor for guests opposite the entrance. It was not just a dwelling, but a whole universe in miniature. The tepee was the ideal solution for life on the prairies, where conditions could change in a matter of minutes. It provided reliable protection, warmth, and comfort, while remaining lightweight and mobile. It was a real home that was always with you. Modern architects are still studying the aerodynamics and ventilation principles behind the tepee's design. What principles of this ancient dwelling do you think could be used in modern architecture? Share your thoughts in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how fire was not just a source of warmth for indigenous peoples, but a living being? The ability to obtain fire was one of the most fundamental and sacred skills. In the absence of matches and lighters, this process required knowledge, patience, and enormous respect. The most common method was friction. This was done using a bow drill or a hand drill. A bow drill consisted of a bow with a leather strap as a bowstring, a drill bit made of hard wood, and a support block made of soft wood, such as poplar or willow. The bowstring was wrapped around the drill bit. As the bow was moved back and forth, the drill bit began to rotate rapidly in the recess in the board. This friction created fine charred wood dust, which began to smolder due to the high temperature. When the first smoke and smell of burning appeared, it was necessary to act very carefully. The smoldering dust was transferred to a prepared tinder. Tinder is any dry, fibrous material that can easily ignite from a spark. Dry moss, crushed bark, bird down. The master carefully blew on the smoldering coal in the tinder until it burst into a bright flame. This first spark was very valuable. It was used to light the main fire by adding thin, dry twigs and then larger logs. Obtaining fire was a laborious process, so they tried to preserve it for as long as possible. If the tribe was about to set off on a journey, the smoldering coals from the fire were placed in special containers. These could be large shells or horns lined with green moss on the inside to prevent the coals from cooling down and burning through the container. Such a portable fire allowed them to quickly build a fire at a new campsite without wasting time and energy on obtaining it from scratch. Losing fire on the way, especially in winter, could be a real disaster. Therefore, the most experienced members of the community were responsible for preserving it. Knowledge of tree species was also critically important. The Indians knew exactly which wood gave off more heat, which burned longer, and which smoked less. For example, hardwoods such as oak or hickory produced long smoldering coals, ideal for cooking. Fire was the center of social life. Families gathered around it, told stories, held councils, and performed ceremonies. It provided not only physical warmth, but also a sense of community, security, and connection to the spirit world. This skill was not just a mechanical action, but an art form. It taught patience, concentration, and an understanding of the properties of different materials. The ability to start a fire with what the forest provided was essential for survival. But even the hottest fire is useless without the main component of survival: food, which had to be not only obtained, but also preserved for many months. In the next chapter, we will reveal the secrets of how Native Americans created canned food that could be stored for years without refrigeration. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret: how to create an incredibly nutritious product that could be stored for decades and provided strength for long journeys. This product was called Pemmican and was a real strategic resource for the tribes of the Great Plains. It was not just food, but a concentrate of energy. The basis for pemmican was bison meat. It was cut into thin strips and dried in the sun and wind until it became brittle, like chips. Sometimes the drying process was accelerated by hanging the meat on special racks over a slowly smoldering fire. The completely dried meat was then ground. It was placed on a flat stone and beaten with another stone or a wooden mallet until it turned into a fine, almost powdery texture. This work required a lot of physical strength and time. The next important ingredient was bison fat. It was melted over a low heat, separating the pure fat from the cracklings and other impurities. The resulting liquid fat was a key preservative that protected the meat from spoiling. The ground meat was poured into a large bag made of rawhide, called a parfleche. Sometimes dried berries such as urga or cherries were added for flavor and extra nutrition. This enriched the pemmican with vitamins and gave it a pleasant sourness. Then hot melted fat was poured into the bag. It soaked into the meat powder and berries, displacing all the air. The ratio of meat to fat was approximately 1:1 by weight. The contents of the bag were thoroughly mixed and compacted. When the fat solidified, it turned the mixture into a dense, solid briquette. In this form, pemmican could be stored for a very long time without requiring any special conditions. A small piece of this product was incredibly high in calories and could sustain a warrior or hunter for an entire day. It could be eaten dry, simply by breaking off pieces, or added to soup to make it more filling. Pemmican was the ideal food for military campaigns and long journeys. The production of pemmican was a collective effort in which the entire community participated after a successful hunt. It was a way to preserve surplus meat and provide food for the hungry winter, or in case of failure in the next hunt. It was a currency, a reserve, and a guarantee of survival. This ancient recipe is a striking example of how a deep understanding of the properties of food allows you to create effective and long-lasting preserves without modern technology. It was a true science of survival based on centuries of experience. What I am about to show you was the real secret weapon of hunters and warriors. The ability to move through the forest or prairie while remaining invisible and inaudible was valued no less than the ability to shoot a bow. It was the art of blending in with the environment. The basis of camouflage was the use of natural materials. Warriors painted their bodies and faces with clay and charcoal, applying patterns that broke up the human silhouette. These patterns imitated the play of light and shadow in the forest or patterns on the grass. Clothing also played an important role. It was sewn from the skins of local animals, which in itself was excellent camouflage. For additional camouflage, tufts of grass, branches, and leaves could be attached to clothing and headgear. Special attention was paid to eliminating odors. Before hunting or going on a military campaign, men often rubbed their bodies and clothes with fragrant plants, such as wormwood or fir. This masked the human scent that animals can smell from hundreds of meters away. Silent movement was a separate science. The Indians wore moccasins, soft leather shoes that allowed them to feel the ground perfectly under their feet. In such shoes, it was possible to step on a dry branch and shift your weight before it cracked. There was a special walking technique, sometimes called the fox walk. The foot was placed on the ground smoothly, from the outer edge of the foot to the inner edge, and then from the toe to the heel. This minimized noise and allowed for constant control of the surface. The Indians moved slowly, using the stop, look, listen tactic. After taking a few steps, the hunter would freeze, looking around carefully and listening to every sound. This movement was similar to that of the animals themselves. They skillfully used the terrain and natural cover. They moved along lowlands, streams, and in the shade of trees and rocks. They instinctively knew where to crouch and where they could walk upright without being noticed. Observational skills were key. Hunters noticed the slightest changes in their surroundings. Flattened grass, a broken branch, the alarm cry of a bird. All these signs gave them information about what was happening around them. These skills were honed from childhood. Games in which you had to sneak up on a friend unnoticed were part of their upbringing. As a result, an adult warrior or hunter could literally disappear in open terrain. But how did they find food and water in the endless prairies? In the next chapter, you will learn how they read the land like an open book. The ability to read tracks was a vital skill, comparable to literacy in the modern world. For Native Americans, the land was an open book, full of stories, warnings, and clues. Every footprint, every broken twig carried a wealth of information. An experienced tracker could determine the species, size, sex, and even approximate weight of an animal from a single track. He could see how deep the paw or hoof had penetrated the ground. This indicated how heavy the animal was. The distance between the tracks could be used to determine its speed. An animal walking calmly leaves a smooth chain of tracks at equal intervals. A running animal leaves deep prints that are far apart. The freshness of the track was a key indicator. The tracker assessed the clarity of the edges of the print, the presence of moisture in it, and the presence of small debris carried by the wind. All this helped to understand how long ago the animal had passed by, minutes, hours, or days ago. In addition to footprints on the ground, the tracker paid attention to many other signs: gnawed bark on trees, flattened grass on the ground, droppings. All these were pieces of one big puzzle. The condition of the droppings could even be used to determine the animal's diet. Tracking was used not only for hunting, but also for military purposes. Traces could be used to determine the size of an enemy detachment, whether they had horses, and the direction of their movement. Sometimes this made it possible to avoid an ambush, or conversely, to track down the enemy. Trackers had phenomenal memory and observation skills. They memorized the smallest details of the landscape. This allowed them to notice anything that had been disturbed or changed by someone's presence. This skill required not only keen eyesight, but also a deep understanding of animal habits and the laws of nature. The tracker knew where animals usually looked for water, where they fed, and where they rested. This knowledge allowed him to predict their further actions. Training in reading tracks began in early childhood. Children learned by observing their elders, memorizing paw and hoof prints. It was a science passed down from generation to generation. Thus, the ability to read tracks transformed the surrounding world from an incomprehensible and empty space into a living, talking map. It provided knowledge that was the key to food, safety, and ultimately, survival. What if I told you that everything they needed to stay healthy grew right under their feet? Indigenous peoples had encyclopedic knowledge of the medicinal properties of plants. The forest and prairie were not just a source of food and materials for them, but a veritable living pharmacy. This knowledge was accumulated and tested over centuries. Each tribe had its own healers or medicine people who were the guardians of this wisdom. They knew hundreds of plants and their exact uses. One of the most famous examples is willow bark. Native Americans used a decoction of it to relieve discomfort and reduce fever. Modern science later isolated salicin, the active ingredient in aspirin, from willow bark. Yarrow was another versatile plant. Its leaves and flowers were used as a hemostatic and antiseptic agent. Powder from dried yarrow was applied to wounds and cuts to promote healing. Echinacea, known today as a popular immune booster, was actively used by the tribes of the Great Plains. Its roots were chewed or made into poultices to treat bites and inflammation. It was believed to purify the blood and strengthen the body's defenses. Ginger root or mint leaves were used to treat digestive problems. They were brewed into teas that helped calm the stomach. This knowledge is still relevant today in folk medicine around the world. Healers not only knew which part of the plant to use, but also when to harvest it. They understood that the concentration of active substances in the leaves, roots, or flowers varies depending on the season and the phase of the moon. Harvesting plants was a whole ritual. It is important to note that the use of plants was inextricably linked to spiritual practices. The healer believed that it was not only the plant itself that healed, but also the spirit that lived in it. Therefore, prayers were always said and offerings left before gathering. This knowledge was passed down orally from teacher to student. Training could take many years and required not only an excellent memory, but also deep intuition. The healer had to feel and understand not only the plants, but also the patient. The forest pharmacy of Native Americans is a huge legacy that proves that nature has already created everything necessary to maintain health. It is a system based on observation, experience, and deep respect for the plant world. But knowledge of plants was only part of their harmony with nature. Next, we will learn how they used bones and stones to create tools that were no less effective than modern ones. In a world without metal, the ability to create effective tools from readily available materials was the foundation of civilization. Indigenous peoples perfected this art. Stone, bone, and wood were transformed in their hands into knives, scrapers, awls, and arrowheads. The main material for cutting tools was flint, obsidian, or other hard rocks. They had the property of splitting into pieces with very sharp edges. This process is called flaking and requires great skill. The craftsman took a large piece of stone, a core, and struck it with another stone, a hammer stone. With precise blows, he chipped thin flakes, or flakes, from the core. These flakes already had razor-sharp edges and could be used as knives. To create more complex tools, such as arrowheads or spearheads, a retouching technique was used. The craftsman took a flake and, using a bone or horn tool, carefully pressed on its edge. In this way, he chipped off the smallest flakes, giving the product the desired shape and creating notches. Bone was no less important a material. Large bison or deer bones were used to make sturdy scrapers for processing hides. Smaller bones and antlers were used to make awls for piercing holes in leather, sewing needles, and fish hooks. Bison shoulder blades were used as hoes for working the land. Ribs could be used as knives for cutting meat. Virtually every bone found a use in the household. Wood was used as a material for knife handles, axes, and scrapers. Stone or bone tips were attached to the handles with leather straps and resin. Such composite tools were durable and convenient to use. The process of making tools was long and painstaking. It required a deep understanding of the properties of materials. The craftsman had to know at what angle to strike the stone and how much force to apply to the bone. These seemingly primitive tools were incredibly effective. A stone knife was sharp enough to cut up a whole bison. Bone needles made it possible to sew waterproof clothing from leather. The availability of good tools determined the quality of life. They determined the speed of processing the catch, the quality of clothing and housing, and the effectiveness of hunting. Therefore, craftsmen who knew how to make tools were highly respected in the community. In the arid prairies and deserts of the Southwest, water was often more valuable than any other resource. The ability to find and conserve it was key to survival. Indigenous peoples possessed a wealth of knowledge that allowed them to quench their thirst where outsiders would find not a drop. They knew how to read the landscape. They knew that water always flows downhill, so they looked for it in low-lying areas, at the foot of hills, and in the beds of dry rivers. Often, all they had to do was dig a shallow hole in the sand at the bottom of such a riverbed to reach the groundwater. Plants were reliable indicators. Lush greenery in the middle of a scorched plain was a sure sign of nearby water. Trees such as poplars and willows always grow only where their roots can reach moisture. Animal behavior also provided clues. Tracks converging at a single point often led to a spring or hidden water source. Birds flying in the same direction in the morning could indicate the way to a watering hole. In some regions, Native Americans learned to collect morning dew. They laid skins or large leaves on the ground. Moisture condensed on them overnight, which could be collected and drunk in the morning. Various containers were used to carry and store water. In forest areas, these were vessels made of birch bark, stitched and impregnated with resin for water tightness. On the plains, water was often carried in wineskins made from clean bison stomachs or bladders. Tribes that practiced pottery, such as the Pueblo in the southwest, created magnificent clay vessels. The porous structure of the clay allowed water to seep out slightly and evaporate. This process cooled the vessel and kept the water inside cool even in extreme heat. Water was seen as a sacred gift. Springs and water sources were treated with great respect. It was forbidden to pollute them or use water thoughtlessly. They understood the importance of hydration. During long journeys, they drank little and often. Sometimes they would put a small, smooth pebble in their mouth to stimulate salivation and reduce thirst. These methods are the result of thousands of years of observation and a deep connection to the earth. They show that nature always gives clues to those who know how to see them. The arrival of horses in North America completely changed the way of life of the tribes of the Great Plains. From hunters on foot, they became masterful riders. Horses became not just a means of transportation, but friends, comrades in arms, and a measure of wealth. Native Americans developed their own unique style of riding. They rode without saddles or reins, controlling the horse with knee pressure, body weight shifts, and a light halter thrown over the lower jaw. This ensured perfect contact and understanding with the animal. This method of control allowed the rider to have their hands completely free. They could shoot a bow, throw a spear, or fire a gun at full gallop. The warrior and their horse moved as one, giving them a huge advantage in battle and hunting. They were unrivaled masters at hunting bison from horseback. The rider approached the herd at full speed, chose his target, and struck it with arrows from close range. This tactic required incredible courage and honed skills from both man and horse. In battle, warriors used horses for swift attacks and quick retreats. One of the most impressive techniques was the ability to hang off the side of a horse, using its body as a living shield. The warrior held on to the mane or a special loop and could continue fighting. Horses were highly valued, and a good horse was a source of pride. Their breeding became an important part of the economy. Preference was given to hardy, fast, and intelligent animals, capable of surviving on scant fodder in the harsh conditions of the prairies. Horses were treated almost like family members. They were decorated, painted with battle symbols, and cared for. It was believed that horses, like humans, had their own souls and spirits. Horses also made nomadic life easier. Instead of dogs, horses were used to transport luggage on travois. This made it possible to carry larger and heavier loads and to make teepees bigger and more comfortable. The mobility provided by horses allowed tribes to control vast territories. It changed their social structure, military tactics, and even their worldview. The entire culture of the Plains tribes of the 17th and 19th centuries was inextricably linked to this noble animal. The unity between man and horse became a symbol of freedom and the spirit of the Great Plains. It was a union based on trust, respect, and a deep understanding of the animal's nature. Behind all these practical survival skills lay something greater, a holistic philosophy and worldview. Native Americans did not see themselves as masters of nature, but only as an integral part of it. This principle was the foundation of their culture and the key to their long-term survival. They believed that everything in the world was interconnected: people, animals, plants, rocks, wind, and stars. Everything had a spirit and was part of a single great mystery. Disrupting this balance could lead to catastrophic consequences. This principle manifested itself in a respectful attitude towards resources. When a hunter killed a bison, he thanked its spirit for giving its life for the people. Every part of the carcass was used without waste, which was a sign of deep respect. They lived in accordance with natural cycles rather than trying to change them. Their lives were governed by the changing seasons, animal migrations, and the phases of the moon. This allowed them to always be in harmony with the world around them and its rhythms. Knowledge was passed on not through books, but through the spoken word, myths, songs, and personal example. Older generations taught younger ones not only what to do, but also how to think. They taught observation, patience, and the ability to see connections. The concept of property was very different from the European one. Land could not be bought or sold because it could not belong to a person. People belonged to the land, not the other way around. Decisions important to the whole tribe were made at a general council. Everyone had the right to express their opinion, and they were listened to with respect. The goal was not to win an argument, but to reach an agreement that would be best for the whole community. Time was perceived not as a straight line, but as a cycle. Everything repeated itself. Day followed night, winter followed summer, life followed death and was reborn. This gave a sense of stability and confidence in the future. These principles shaped a society that was resilient and adaptable. Their strength lay not in technology, but in deep wisdom and the ability to live in harmony with the world. This is the main lesson of survival that they have left us as a legacy. We have examined only a few aspects of the vast heritage of the indigenous peoples of North America. Their lessons in survival are not just a set of techniques, but a holistic system of knowledge based on observation, respect, and a deep connection with nature. They show that humans can thrive in any environment if they are willing to learn from the world around them rather than fight against it. In today's world, where technology creates the illusion of independence from nature, this ancient wisdom is particularly relevant. It reminds us of the importance of simple things: clean air, fresh water, the warmth of a hearth, and unity with those around us. These skills teach us not only to survive, but also to live more consciously and harmoniously. Perhaps we should all sometimes turn off our gadgets, go outside and try to read the language of the earth as the Native Americans did. This is the path to understanding not only the world, but also ourselves. What other aspects of the life and culture of indigenous peoples would you like to see in our future videos? Suggest your topics in the comments and we will try to cover them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.